can't make money anymore. We can't do what we used to do, and we're done being nice.
An algae crisis threatening our treasure coast.
A cycle of despair and disgust amidst promises made and broken.
Why should I take the risk, fight my way back through it just to have this happen again next year?
Will it be different this time? I'm Kelly Dunn in Martin County.
I'm Shannon Cake in Stewart.
I'm in Jensen Beach.
I'm John Shainman in Ryo.
And I'm Michael Williams at Lake Okeechobee. The name Okeechobee meant big water to the Indians who first saw and settled this land. But now all that water threatens to swamp our coastal communities.
Tonight, we'll take a look at new efforts to navigate a more sustainable future.
Your health.
Your wallet.
Your everyday life.
For the Big Lake and for all of us who live around this giant heart of our water system.
February 5th, 2016. The Army Corps of Engineers announced it would begin releasing the maximum amount of water from Lake Okeechobee to the St. Lucie estuary.
Jump 3 months later, blue-green algae was spotted along the St. Lucie riverbanks. Signs went up in some areas warning people not to come into contact with the water.
By June, high levels of toxins were found where the algae blooms were inches thick.
This month, Martin County extended a local state of emergency for a third week as some blue-green algae was still being seen in waterways.
I'm in downtown Stewart, ground zero of the toxic blue-green algae crisis. Central Marine is right across the way, where the sight of the algae and the stench is more than enough to turn anyone's stomach. But this isn't a new problem. News Channel 5's John Shainman joins us with the history of the algae bloom.
Stop me if you've heard this before.
It's impacting real estate.
They ignored the issue till the fish started floating up dead in the river.
This is April 1998.
But the bottom line is we got to start somewhere. We're starting right here.
30,000 signatures turned into Martin County commissioners after a massive fish kill in the St. Lucie River. Elected officials encouraged that a solution is close at hand.
We are getting the assistance that we think we will need.
Former Congressman Mark Foley bringing in experts to see for themselves.
Clearly, we didn't ask the heads of the various agencies to come down here so I could be on TV. This is really about solving problems.
But the problem doesn't go away. It returns with a vengeance.
It smells just like a septic tank that overflows. You know, only 10 times as much because you can smell it throughout the whole neighborhood.
In 2005, large algae blooms appear in Martin County. Senator Bill Nelson takes a tour.
When you discharge water from Lake Okeechobee that has a lot of nutrients, you're going to get algae like this.
Algae that returned again and again, like in 2013. That prompted a visit from Governor Rick Scott, who went to the St. Lucie Lock and spoke with the media, but stayed clear of the protesters.
This is so unfair to Florida citizens. We pay our federal taxes. They need to show up and fund the projects they committed to fund.
The governor then blaming the federal government for not properly funding the Army Corps of Engineers, a position he still holds today. Speaking of today, this most recent crisis has politicians from Washington returning to the Treasure Coast.
The question today is, how do we stop putting nutrient-laden water into the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee?
Maybe the right question, but are the right people in place to make it happen?
Of course, that's one of the big issues towards solving this problem, getting the local, state, and federal officials all on the same page, and as we've seen, it's no easy task.
I'm at the Port Myakka Lock and Dam on Lake Okeechobee, and when water levels in the Big Lake get too high, those gates open and all that water comes rushing toward our coastal communities. So this is as good a place as any to begin a discussion about issues and solutions.
Now, we could go all the way around through here.
John Campbell is a guide on Lake Okeechobee and says he has fished these waters for more than half a century.
We are having some of the best fishing we have had in many, many years.
Restoration of the Kissimmee River that feeds the Big Lake has Campbell often seen a different view than the algae-filled one in the nightmares of Treasure Coast residents.
The press right now is solely directed at Lake Okeechobee producing this situation. In my humble opinion, I just think it's more to it than that.
It's part of our system. It contributes to
Tara Barty says he's right. She's the senior scientist for the Arthur Marshall Foundation for the Everglades. Make no mistake, she thinks the huge outflows from Lake Okeechobee are part of the problem, but only part.
The outflows dumping the blue-green or the cyanobacteria into the two estuaries is definitely fed by the legacy phosphorus, the legacy nutrients that are in the lake. So whether they came from the Kissimmee Basin in the north or were back pumped in from the south, the lake itself is definitely contributing.
Urban, neighborhood, and farm runoff, all of that is feeding the algae bloom too, she believes.
We're all going to have to participate in managing our own surface water runoff, properly maintaining septic tanks, managing fertilizer, best management practices on the farms.
Water flows into the lake from the Kissimmee River Basin to the north. That water once flowed out of the lake south into the Everglades before man built canals and floodgates to tame it. Big Sugar and other agricultural interests have said no to efforts to buy land needed to restore the natural water flow. Add in the aging dike around the lake that the Army Corps worries could spring a catastrophic leak if the lake level is too high, and it means a lot of water is being sent east and west during rainy season.
We need to shore up the dike and get that done. We need to buy the land, we need to build the reservoir, and then we need to build the stormwater treatment areas.
But even if the political will, money, and land all came together, it would not end the competing interest at the heart of the balancing act in this huge water system.
If you have the water too high, you have no fisheries. You have nowhere for the fish to live, nowhere for the fish to lay their eggs, nowhere for the wading birds.
John Campbell is no scientist, but he figures he knows nature around here pretty well. Send the water south, he says.
I think pushing to the south is the way nature created this lake. And I think that when man has injected his theory behind it, sometimes it's not always right. I don't think God makes mistakes when he makes a river system.
Fixing human mistakes is the ongoing challenge now, and one in which all of us have a stake in the course being charted for the future. A little later in the broadcast, we're going to focus much more closely on the dike surrounding Lake Okeechobee and its role in all of the issues we're discussing.
Thick mats of algae look bad, but take my word for it, the smell is worse. People who live near the blue-green algae say it's like rotten eggs. Others say it's like living in a cow pasture, and I think I would agree with that. The smell is so bad, it forced people inside this summer.
In the censored version, I'd say it smells close to like, when you step in a big cow patty.
While some Martin County residents have seen the sight of lime green algae over the years, the smell this summer is unprecedented.
Haven't been outside. I tried to go out actually earlier today to skim the pool, and I just went back inside.
It forced some people not only out of the water, but out of their own backyards and into their homes just to escape the stench.
It's almost like a dead fish odor. It just kind of bowls you over. A sulfurish, dead fish odor is what it smells like.
In some areas, the algae has turned blue, brown, and black. Hydrogen sulfide gives decomposing algae its rotten egg smell. And it's not only homes along the water that are dealing with the stench.
When I walk the dog down the end of the street, I'm catching a whiff down it.
Worrying some residents, the toxins that could be in the air are putting their health at risk.
It's just gross. The smell is as gross as it looks.
Is there a reason to be concerned about our health? News Channel 5's Shannon Cake went to the experts to get some answers.
Okay, not very technical, but what we're looking for is green stuff.
For 25 years,
little green balls floating in the water.
Dr. Kathleen Ryan has been on the hunt for outrageously high toxin levels.
Well, I came here in 2013, and I also came here in 2005. There was a large bloom at that time.
Now, the Florida International University chemist is back.
I needed a good bloom.
You may be the only person in all of South Florida.
That's right.
Looking for this bloom.
Looking for toxins, yeah. I'm the toxin lady. Yeah, I'm good with that.
Whether you're good with it or even understand it, we all need Dr. Ryan's work. Her testing can lead to solutions.
So I try to harvest the algae so that I can take that back to the lab and purify the toxin.
That dangerous toxin found in the algae called microcystin is the primary organism we need to avoid.
The short-term acute exposure can cause very massive liver failure. Longer term liver damage, reduced liver function, and ultimately liver cancer.
Ryan's recommendation, stay out of the water. Avoid the algae at all costs, whether you find it floating or sitting on a beach.
The toxin itself is not volatile, so it's not, evaporating into the air. It doesn't readily go through the skin. So the way you have to get exposed is either through ingestion or injection, right? So if you wouldn't want to water ski or jet ski here, for sure, don't touch it, don't stir it up.
Besides attacking the liver, scientists fear worse damage from what they call HABs, or harmful algae blooms. This 2010 report filed with the Centers for Disease Control found 61 people died after algae blooms at several freshwater lakes. In these cases, the toxic algae caused dermatological, gastrointestinal, even neurological problems.
Headache, dizziness, confusion. Those are the three most common neurological symptoms.
Dr. Linda Powell is a neurologist at the Cleveland Clinic in Jupiter.
The neurotoxins have been associated with sometimes paralysis, muscle twitching.
Those, she says, are the short-term neurological symptoms.
We don't really know long-term what the side effects are. We look at ALS and Parkinson's disease. They have a higher incidence of ALS and Parkinson's. That's been also predominantly associated with the microcysts. And we just don't have the scientific evidence to make a clear-cut statement.
You see how deep it is? Yeah. It's completely in the water everywhere you look.
The green invasion is keeping Bill Natalie's boys here in the pool.
Normally your kids are swimming in this water?
They will swim in it or they'll fish in it, right? When you fish, you get water all over you. Not a chance. The boat is dry docked. I wouldn't risk my kids going in that water.
Because it's nasty. It is nasty.
Obviously, they're boys. They're going to be outside. But obviously, we're pretty darn careful.
Do you think about moving?
I try not to. This is why I came here.
But he is thinking and wondering about his kids' health.
This could have big impacts on my family and my kids. It's really scary.
Shannon Cake, WPTV News Channel 5.
Again, the toxin microcyst is what scientists test for and worry about. Some good news, the doctors in our report tell us the toxin tends to stay in the water and does not settle on plant life in the soil or in riverbeds. Another good note, sunlight is the toxin's enemy. If you come in contact with algae, soap and water should remove any danger from your skin and clothes.
Boards only in Jensen Beach, one of the areas hard hit by the algae issue on the Treasure Coast. I'm wearing this mask because the smell is just unbelievable. And eventually, after time, you can notice my eyes actually watering now too. This has had such a dramatic impact on business here.
This is what we get to look at. This is what we get to smell.
So I was trying to think what this is like, and this is like a sewage treatment plant. This is like untreated sewage. It has a smell. It takes your breath away.
This is like an open sewage pit, and I can't work in this. I'm not going to force people to work in this. This is disgusting. And believe me, if I worked for me, I wouldn't be here right now. This makes me really angry. I moved here in '82 because of the water. The water quality's changed. It's gone away.
And you're not going to get a good north wind this time of year to mix it and flush it out.
No, we're not. During this time when nobody's using their boats, they don't break them, I don't get to fix them, I don't have any income.
Of all the things you could imagine having an impact on your business, this is probably the last.
Yeah, this is not exactly something that you plan for. You plan for hurricanes, you plan for storms, you plan for a lot of other things. You don't plan for, an eco disaster like this. It is possible to survive this. We survived the lost summer of 13. In 13 we had the same thing, and business dropped down quite a bit. What I'm afraid of with this is going to take a lot longer to clean out. I'm not interested in borrowing hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to keep this thing afloat, especially if nobody's going to fix it. Why should I take the risk, go through it, fight my way back through it just to have this happen again next year? I am angry. Put it plainly, I'm off. You have politicians giving lip service to everybody saying, yes, we've got to do something about this. Yes, we've got to fix this. Okay, get off your tail and do something. Come on.
Because Phil Norman was so angry, he decided to take action. He allowed a local company to try an experimental technique to hopefully remove the algae. Crews scooped the algae, filtered the water, then returned it to the marina. Short-term results appear favorable, but scientists fear this process could spread those dangerous toxins that you can't see or smell.
Martin County commissioners issued a state of emergency 3 weeks ago, but they need their state and federal partners to join the fight. The commissioners fear people's health is at risk due to prolonged exposure to the algae.
It is an indescribable stench that stayed with me far into the night, and get the Center for Disease Control and the Department of Health involved so that we can protect our people from what could very well be long-term, significant health problems.
The state needs to quit pointing the finger at the federal government in regards to the dike, and the federal government needs to quit pointing the finger at the state in regards to the land. Each of them need to accept responsibility for the disaster that we're experiencing in Martin County.
One local lawmaker says he's an ally for Treasure Coast residents and that he will push for purchase of land south of Lake Okeechobee for eventual storage of water. You hear the term all the time, move the water south so it can get into the Everglades eventually. News Channel 5's John Shainman sat down recently with Stewart Senator Joe Negron, who's also the incoming Florida Senate president.
It's nothing short of a man-made disaster.
As incoming Senate President, Joe Negron plans to attack the Lake Okeechobee crisis on two fronts.
To try to stop the flow of polluted water into our community. And the second thing I'm working on is we have to have water storage south of the lake, additional storage, so that the Army Corps has somewhere to send this water rather than east into our communities.
The Treasure Coast lawmaker is one of the few Republicans outspoken about buying land south of Lake O after the passage of Amendment 1 last year.
We have a dedicated source of funding now for these type of projects.
Senator Negron also took center stage during the last crisis in 2013, gathering experts for a Senate committee hearing in Stewart. So what's happened since?
We're bridging the Tamiami Trail 2.5 miles. We have additional funding for C-44.
Negron, like Governor Scott, points the finger today at the Army Corps of Engineers, asking for them to update their lake release schedule, which is 8 years old,
to reflect the hundreds of millions of dollars of improvements to the dike.
But first things first, he wants the dike and the lock closed.
But I'm hoping that they'll just give our community a break. You know, a couple weeks of no releases. It's not going to be the end of the world if the lake is at 16 feet.
One of the chief concerns we hear about all the time is the aging Herbert Hoover Dike. I'm standing on it that surrounds Lake Okeechobee. And since 2007, there's been a major effort by the Army Corps of Engineers to modernize this dike. From Belle Glade to Port Mayaca, where I stand now, they've dug a huge trench in many spots. Imagine it, a huge trench, and in it, deep below my feet, they've poured a clay that is hardened, creating a wall between the waters of Lake Okeechobee and the communities beyond.
Digging and building. This is what that new dike wall looks like below ground. The Army Corps of Engineers says modernizing the entire dike is a $1 billion job, and it will take another 4 to 6 years to finish everything. Waiting on money from Congress has hurt, says Craig Hodershell, a water resources engineer and consultant.
It is really about money. The solution's been figured out.
But a modern dike is not a cure-all for water management issues here. A bit of history. After Hurricane Katrina, the Army Corps rewrote the book on how much water could be held in places like Lake O.
Following the Hurricane Katrina and the subject of dike safety came up.
Before 2008, the Army Corps managed lake levels between 15.5 and 17.5 feet above sea level. After 2008, 12.5 feet to 15.5 feet. But dike safety was not the only reason for the change.
The water quality within the lake and the lake ecology was not what it is today.
Too much water was killing everything from snail kites to native grasses that are nurseries for life in Lake Okeechobee.
If the Herbert Hoover Dike were in perfect shape, it would not eliminate all of the issues in the greater Everglades system.
The Army Corps answers to many people, coastal residents, lake interest, and wildlife advocates too.
So what we have found is that the optimal release, your preferred release range is from 12.5 to 15.5. If we can hold the lake within that range, then it's a healthy lake.
And so, yes, a modernized dike is a must, but excess water will still go east or west until or unless more of it can be moved south into the Everglades as nature intended. The fierce debate over that planning goes on. Earlier this month, Republican Senator Marco Rubio toured Central Marine in Rio. He called the algae crisis an ecological disaster and an economic disaster with long-term implications. Democratic Senator Bill Nelson toured the St. Lucie River 3 weeks ago. He's urging lawmakers to pass a huge water bill. He's also calling on the state to use Amendment 1 money to buy land south of Lake Okeechobee.
One thing we've heard a lot of from you over the past many weeks is that you're tired of hearing politicians say the same old thing and that you want action. I had a chance to talk with local Democratic Congressman Patrick Murphy. Congressman, you're in Capitol Hill attire. I'm still dressed for Lake Okeechobee. Thanks for joining us from Capitol Hill. We appreciate it. Let me ask you, I talked to the Army Corps of Engineers. They say they gauge another 4 to 6 years before they finish a new modernized dike around Lake Okeechobee, maybe another $500 million. Any way that could be sped up by putting some people's feet to the fire?
Well, look, in my conversations with the Army Corps of Engineers, a lot of this comes down to funding, and they're trying to balance, all of the different projects they have, not only in the United States, but around the world. There are some projects that they will admit, even those around the dike, that with the necessary resources, they could speed up. Now, let's not forget, and let's not forget to give them credit for about the $400 or $500 million they have already spent fortifying the dike. But we got to move quicker. This is an emergency situation we're dealing with here.
Sending water south as it naturally flowed out of the lake into the Everglades. That would require buying land from sugar and other agricultural interests. Where do we stand there? What is your commitment to pushing on those efforts?
We all, as Floridians, need to be demanding that the governor and those in Tallahassee spend the money to buy some of that land south the lake, make a deal, right, to send this water south. And again, it's not the only piece of the pie.
Have you in the last month been on the phone with agricultural, including sugar interest? If not, why not? And will you commit to the Treasure Coast constituents you serve that you'll be making those kind of phone calls if you haven't made them already?
Yeah, and Michael, it's not just in the last month. I mean, from the time I got elected to the Congress, have been reaching out to everybody from the President of the United States, the Army Corps of Engineers, to agricultural interests in and around Florida and around our district, whatever they might be growing, talking to them, because I believe it's important that they're at the table.
I've asked others, I'll ask you. Is your Senate campaign taking money from what is called Big Sugar? If so, are you willing to go to bat for constituents if you are taking that money? Your campaign's boasted before it's not. Where do you stand there?
Yeah, I haven't taken any money from sugar, and I don't know where all the rest of the folks in the race stand. That's up to other folks to investigate.
Generally speaking, people say, listen, we hear the same thing all the time, a lot of promises, generally speaking here, and no action. What can you say to your Treasure Coast constituents that this time will be different?
My constituents and I look at it as a team, and we are up here making, in essence, a sales pitch to get things done for the environment, for the Everglades. We have to continue doing that, and that's why I'm just so grateful so many constituents continue to come back to Washington, D.C. time after time to help me make that case.
Congressman Patrick Murphy, we appreciate you taking time to join us on this vital topic to so many in our community. Thanks for joining us from Capitol Hill.
Thanks, Michael.
This algae crisis isn't just a Treasure Coast problem. This is something that is impacting many people from all walks of life and in many areas. I'm with Eve Samples, a longtime columnist with our news partner, tcpalm.com. Talk about what you're hearing from your readers.
Sure, Kelly. You're absolutely right. This isn't just a Treasure Coast issue, and this isn't just an environmental activist issue anymore. It's moved beyond that. This is affecting families this summer in our community. This is affecting homeowners who may see their property values suffer. It's also affecting public health.
I can't emphasize enough the point that you just made, that this is now impacting everyday life for all of these people.
It also affects folks on all sides of the political spectrum. I talk to Democrats, Republicans, progressives, libertarians. They don't agree on much this political season, but one thing they do agree on is that we need action, we need bold action.
Talk about these letters that have been signed and this effort that's underway to actually see change.
Yes, we published a letter to Governor Scott on the front page of our newspaper about 2 weeks ago, and also digitally. So far we've received 12,000 letters. We did the same thing in 2013. Back then we got a few hundred. So that tells you how many more people are paying attention, interested in this issue, and really want a fix, a real fix.
And yet so many who have called this home for all of these years or for lifetimes will continue to have hope that it'll actually get fixed this time and that we won't go through this again.
Absolutely. I'm an optimist, and previous inaction won't stop me from calling for action. And I know that's true of our editorial board at TC Palm and true of many in the community.
We thank you for joining us as we search for answers and solutions into the growing algae crisis. And we hope you'll join us now for a live chat on our WPTV Facebook page as we continue the conversation.